So I've started the meeting now. You can just react whether you can hear me very well. So let me have some thumbs up if you can hear me.
Yeah, I think most of the people can hear you at the moment, Dennis.
Okay, so let me start sharing my screen. So we are about 12 to go. So let's somebody confirm that you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
Thank
I
you.
can see your screen.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. So one more minute to get started. So, all right. So we can get started. For whoever will not be able to join the meeting, we always have the recording and share with them after the meeting. So before I start, I want to give a chance to the host of this series, who is Brian Keboy, to say hi and just a brief introduction about him. Keboy.
All right, thank you so much, Dennis Kaduri, for being there today to take us through object-oriented programming. I really hope this will be a great session. So my name is Brian Kemboy. I'm a software engineering student in Kirinyaga University. And I'm also a Microsoft Learn student ambassador. I always have this goal of, while trying to learn something, to always impact others as well through my learning. So for anyone you are in today for the call, you're all welcome. Invite your friends over. Let's always learn together and upskill. So this is .NET series, and this is our 6th event. And if you maybe missed one or two of the events, I'll be sharing a link to our YouTube channel, whereby you can recap on some of the things. And also, we have quite a lot of resources, and like we are encouraging like all of us to take the C# certification foundations, because having a certification is something very important for you, because it adds some credibility to your resumes. So I'll also be sharing the same link as Dennis will be presenting, and also some links through the documentation and our GitHub's code repository. So last week we were able to learn generics and interfaces. Omolo Uganda was the one taking us through it. And it was a great session whereby it was a hand-on skill. So we expect to learn more also today in the session. And so let's take this opportunity to welcome Dennis to take us through this session. Dennis, you're welcome.
Thank you, Brian Keboy. As you have said, my name is Dennis Washira, a computer science student at Kirinyaga University. So this is just a intro about my bio. I'm a gold ambassador, a technical blogger at the tech community at Microsoft.com, then the vice chair of the Computer Society of Kirinyaga, and also as a software developer. You can find me on Twitter at Dennis Wazira _ or LinkedIn Dennis Washira. and we can get started about functions, classes, and objects in C#. And just a simple introduction of the function definition. So a method allows us to group together code that perform a specific task. And this way, we can write or define a method once and reuse it whenever we need. Like for instance, like the example that I'm displaying here, it's this is a function, like it's a print number that generates random numbers and displays those numbers in a console. So whenever now we define this program function, and then we call it on our main function, we'll be able now to use this code instead of writing each function to display a random number whenever you want to display a random number in our console app. And there are two things you need to do when working with function. First thing is a function definition. So function definition, it's like defining what your function wants it to do. Like this is a function. This function, what does it do? It generates a random numbers using this random class that's available on C# library. Then when that number is randomized between 0 and 10, we can console log that number in our console using this console class and a function called writeLine. And now we can be able to display that number in our console app. Then the next thing after defining your function, you need to call that function. So we have defined our function, which is now print number. Then we have declared our variables, which is now the number, which is now we are assigning it from the generated number that you are getting here. You need to tell now the program where to call this program, this function, and display what this function does. So that's why you can see now in our main function, we shall see it on the demo. So inside our main function, the program.class, when writing the C# code, you need to call that now function so that it can be called whenever this main function is executed or when you run this code. And I'll be shifting between the PowerPoint and the demo so that we can get to understand this. So we can try now to create this a simple function, which now like this. You can try to define this function which has a print number. Then we define what we need. Then we call this function inside our function. Then let me stop sharing my PowerPoint and we can do this on a demo on the VS Code. So I have a folder here that's called .NET. So I want to just open a terminal on this folder and create a new console app, which is now you use the .NET keyword and the new to create a new console app. So I use the .NET and the new keyword. What type of app I want? It's a console app. Then I want to use the fragment n to give this my app a name. So I can call it like this. I can call it like a function demo project. So for instance, like that. So then when I click enter, you can see now a console app was created successfully. let's wait for it to finish compiling. Yes, the app is done. Now you need to navigate to that project. If you confirm on this folder, we have now a new folder called function, this class. Let me refresh. So we have this function demo here. So I can open this with VS Code. So let me navigate to that project. So it's cd function that project. I'm inside it. So let me open with VS Code with code.start to open this project on my VS Code. I hope by now you can see my VS Code. About to confirm.
Yes, we can see your VS Code, and its font is okay.
Thank you, thank you. So we have opened our project, which is function demo with the VS Code. But for you to get the full experience of an IDE, what's like a Visual Studio does, we always encourage to use the Explorer, the Explorer, which is give it some time to load here. We shall be able to see it. You can use the File Explorer, which is here, but for accessibility and to get the full functionality of an IDE, you know, there is difference between an IDE and an editor. So VS Code is an editor, but Visual Studio is a IDE, Integrated Development Environment. So this, we are opening this with File Explorer, but I wanted to open this project with this Solution Explorer here. So let me close that, and you can see now under this Solution Explorer, we have our project, and now we have our namespace here where our entry point is. So we have now our program.cs. You may be asking yourself where the main method is, where the entry point of this code is, but since we are in .NET 8 and 7, they use something called top level. Let me confirm something here. Just a minute. Yeah, so you may be asking yourself, where is the main method on this application? But since .NET 7 and I think 8, we use something called top level statements to streamline the application, where now we eliminate the main method on our program.cs file, and you just write your code here in this file, and the compiler take care of the entry point of this program. As long as you have this program.cs, the compiler will know like your entry point is this file.cs. So anything you need now is just to write your code. So with this now, this is a variant C# code that can be built and run, and we can test this. So let me open my terminal here, and if I run .NET run, I expect to get this code because we are using top level statement. I don't need to define the main, the class program. Then I call the main method. The compiler does that for now. So let's if I open the project for the first time, it might take time to build and run, you can see now we have our console, the row one here. So that means now our project is good and everything is set up. So we want now to write a simple function that we have just explained about. It's just we want to group a code that performs a specific task. Then we call this function each and every time we want to call this, instead of writing each function of anything, like we want to maybe to do a calculation to display something. So I just remove these comments here. Then let me just edit this, and I can say like welcome to functions. Maybe we are running about classes, and later on we learn about objects. So that is just a statement will be displaying whenever we run this project. So just I've said you don't need to worry the main method of this project. You just need to write your implementation there and call the function. So the first thing we seen is the function definition. So we want to have a function that multiplies two numbers. So to make it interesting, let's make a function that makes you to meet, maybe generate a random alien and say the alien says hi to you. So I want to have a function here, which is now void. For instance, let's say call it meet alien. So it's a function that's returning nothing when you indicate void. So it's a function, then open curly braces. So under this curly braces, I want to use a random class that is available in the C# library. You can use it out of the box. So random, then give it a variable name. So it can be number generated. Now I use the new keyword to instantiate a new number on that random class, and now I call the constructor of that class, which is now random. Then I want to give my alien a name. So a name is a string. So I might give it a string, which is now name. I can give it a special name, like you know how aliens are being named. So I want to have an interesting name here. So it's just an X. Then I concatenate it with a random generated number from our object. Here we have instantiated from this random class. So it's a random number gen. Then dot next. If I use this function dot next, I'll be able to specify what the range of numbers I want. So I want the range of numbers perhaps from 10. I want a range from 10 and maybe 999. So what this will do, I'll be assigning an alien just a variable, a string and a letter X. I concatenate it with any number that will be generated on this between 10 and 99. And probably what we want to know about this alien, maybe age. So age is a integer. So integer age. Then I want to random generate this age from our random class here. So I want to call the numGen, the object instantiated from this random. So numberGen. Then I want to use the next function under this object, which is next. Then I want the same to specify the range where I want my number to be generated. So perhaps maybe alien lives more than 500 years of 600. So you can generate it from 100 and maybe 600, something like that. So with now, we have defined our function, which tells you to meet an area. But this function, it does not have any line to display what we have defined this variable here. So I want to have some console.line here to display some of the information about this area so that we can know whenever we call this function, we are able to see something being displayed out of our function. So I want to use now the class console. The class console. Then inside our class console, we have this function which is a write line. So you display something on a console using the console class and calling the write line function. So inside our write line function, I want to pass some string there. So I can say, hi, I am. So I am. So we want to concatenate this using the plus operator. Now the name of this area, so which now we generated here. So I want to use this name here and display it there. Then I want to display the age of this area, so which is now console. So let me duplicate this to save time. So I want console.line. I want to just say I am this old. So I am, instead of here name, I want now to replace that with this age here. So age, then concatenate it with that so that we can add some string there, which is now I am this age here. So I am like, maybe it will be 200 will be generated here. So it will be I am 200 year, 200 years, something like that. And another thing, maybe for the last one, let's say, oh, so let's display something like to remind the user like, oh, and I am an alien. So with that now, our function is done. We have defined our function. There we have named our variables there. We have generated some random there numbers. Then we have displayed the information on this area on these console.line functions. So this just function definition. Now we want to call this function so that whenever we run this program, we are able to see or fire this function. So anywhere in your program.cs, you just need to do now to call your function, maybe at here down or maybe at the top, because the compiler will just know, like as I explained, .NET 8 uses top level statement. So to streamline the application by eliminating the need for explicit of the main method. So this feature will let you to execute code directly in the program root without wrapping it with the program.cs or any class. So I have defined this. Let me now call this function. So I can decide to call this function at the top here. And so let me call my function here, which is now meet alien. So with this now, whenever I run this program, it will execute this method, and now it will invoke this method, do the random numbers, assign it to those age and name, then display that. So if I now run this program, so let's go back to the console, and then .NET. For your safety, always build your project before running it. So let's build to see whether you have some error. So you can see there are no errors. So let's now run our code to clear the console, then .NET run. A nice one. You can see now our function has been called. We have hi, I am X782, I am 306 years, oh, and I am an alien. So we have now defined our function and code it. You can see now we can display this. And now with this now, as we define what is a function is, so it performs as a specific function. And now we can call this function whenever we want it. So if I call this function like 4 times, that's how now our function makes your work efficient. Like you only need to define your function once, and then you call it like as many times as possible. So like these are like 5 times. So we expect when we run this project, we get some like around 5 aliens. So let me run that. So you can see like we have now 5 aliens. The first one has 168 inch, 323, 381, 468, and 279. And let me explain some what is happening here. So the code, while we run the code, it's getting the first function, calling the function, display what function is done. Then go to the next function, call the function, display what the function is doing. Then go to the next line. The same thing happens until we go up to the end of our code. So that's why you are seeing like we have the 5 aliens being displayed. So are we all right up to there? So any question up to there, so that we can go now to the next part where now we can have parameterized functions. Any question? All right, so let's continue with our presentation. So we have done now the function coding. We have called our function like 5 times, and you will be able to see that it displays 5 aliens. Then let's go on with some functions with the parameters. So what we have covered before, it was just a basic an example of a method. But where method really start to shine is where now we can be able to add parameters and return values. Like an example here, we have a function that is expecting an integer number and returning something. And when we call that function in our main function, we'll be able to pass dynamically some values and then be able to display whatever you want to do. Like maybe you want to do the square of a number. So you want to get the square of a number. So you want to define this function with the parameter, multiply, so get the function. Then when calling the function, you need to pass the parameter you want, like the 4. So the square of 4 is 16. Then maybe you can call the function again with a different value, which is like 7. So the square of 7, which is 49. So let's demonstrate that as quick as possible. So on the same program, let me comment that and go just below here. So I want now to have a function that is multiplying just 2 numbers. So I want to be just as simple as that. So I want a function like void multiply, then our function. So that's where we indicate our parameters. So we need integer num1 Then we want to have int num2. When I say num is just naming and giving my variable a name, which is num1 or num2. Then I open the curly braces to define what I want. So under my function, I just want to return the multiplication of these numbers. So maybe int result will be multiplication of these two numbers here. So which is now num1 multiplied by num2. So always remember to terminate your code in C#. Then I want to display the result of this multiplication. So I use the console class, which is console dot then the function right line, which is here, then display the result of this multiplication. So the result is a full colon there, then I just concatenate it with the result. So the result variable, which is now the multiplication of these two numbers here. So let me terminate my code. So always remember, whenever you define your function, you need to call it. So I want to call now my function, which is now multiply. So multiply, let me just copy so multiply, you can see now our function expect, you can see the error you are getting, like there is no argument given that corresponds to the required parameter that are required in the multiply function. You can see now, like we need now to pass our parameters here. So for instance, I want to multiply the two numbers. Like now we want to supply the integer num1, then supply the integer num2. And then when you terminate this, the error is gone, and now you can run the program. So let me clear the console. Then I do the .NET run. So what you expect is the multiplication of these 3 and 4, which is the result is 12. So now the same way you can call the function as many times as possible. So like 4 times, but now with different parameters. For instance, I can add 6 there and 8 there, then 7 there and 10. Then we have 10 and maybe 600. And the same thing, so the function will display 4 times the multiplication of 3 times 4, 6 times 8, 7 times 10, and 10 times 600. So when I run the program, the same way. So .NET run, then you can see the result of 3 times 4 is 12, 6 times 8 is 48, 7 times 10 is 70, and 10 times 600 is 6,000. And that's all about the function. So you can design to have functions without parameters and function with parameters. So most of the flexibility comes when you want now to have as one function that is accepting different parameters. So like this one, it's more flexible, and it's you can see how the short it is. You only need to define the function once and then call that function as many times as you want. And that's all about functions. Before we can go on to classes and objects, let me confirm whether you have any question or any clarification you need to know about functions. Any question? All right, so let's go on with our class today, the session. Oh, I can see we have one hand raised. So Dennis Monene. I think we shall tackle the questions at the end so that we can be able to get all these concepts at once, then have QA at the end. So the next topic is a combined, it's a class and objects. And what I can say about classes and objects are mostly useful because they allow us to build our own data structures. And by doing this, so that we can do, so what do I mean by creating our own data structure? Like, well, C# is an object-oriented languages, so we use code to describe objects. For instance, let me say like I want to create a video game and we want to add cat, like this cat here you are seeing here. I want to add cat in our game. And what we can do, we can create a cat class. So we can create a cat class, which is now a blueprint of what a class of what cat is. So a cat may have some like may have some variables like name and age, and also some method like say meow, walk, eat. So a class is just a blueprint of an entity. So when I say now, when we want to create a game where we can add our cat, so we create a class cat. I hope we are together up to there. So we create a class cat now, which is now just a blueprint of what a cat is. So a cat may have like age, a cat may have like name, a cat may have like function like saying meow, a function like walking, a function like that. So that's a class, like a blueprint of what the cat is. So we create a class. Then whenever we want to spawn a new cat, like the likes of all like games like Call of Duty, whenever now like a person is being shot and dead, we want to respawn that person. So at the back of that code, like the Call of Duty game, we have a class person. And that person is just a blueprint of the person, like a person can walk, a person can have a name, a person can have an age. So out of that, when we want now to respawn that person, that's where now object comes in. So an object is a real world entity. Like now, class person, when I'm in the Call of Duty, maybe Brian Keboy is now the object. So I want to respawn object Keboy using the class person that we have talked about. So for instance, like this, an example here for the cat. So we have a cat class, and whenever we want to have a new cat in our game, so we just need to instantiate an object, which is now a different like cat Stephen out of our class cat. Are we together up now? So out of that now, our class, we can be able now to instantiate a lot of many objects. Like we can have now cat 1, which is now maybe cat Steven, we have cat Bob, we have cat Tom, cat Jerry, something like that. The same I've explained like the class person. We have a class person. Then we want to instantiate an object. So an object is a real world entity, like Brian, like me, Dennis, and I'm a real entity. So I'm an object, which is an instance of a class person. And that's a simple way I can explain what is a class and object and how they did it. So whenever you want now to have an object, you need to instantiate that object out of a class that you have been you have maybe declared in your code. And whenever now you use the new keyword, you'll be able to instantiate a lot of object out of that class. And that's a simple explanation. You can see now a class we have seen it has some values, variables and method like name, age, color, and the method. And out of that, you'll be able now to instantiate an object. So in an example, in a code, so like an example here, we have a class. So you use the keyword to indicate that you are declaring a class. So you have a class called cat. Then under our class cat, we have some two variables, the name and the things we saying like it's a blueprint. Right now we are blueprinting what a cat might have, like the age, the name, then some function. So under our class cat, we have the name and also age. Under that, the same class, we saying like it can have variables and method. So we have a method that is just taking the name of that cat and saying meow. So that's just a simple example of now, like this is now the blueprint. After you have done your item, mute yourself. Thank you. So I was explaining the blueprint. So this is the class cat, the blueprint of our class cat. It has two variables and one function. Then after naming this, declaring our cat, we need now to instantiate an object out of this out of this class. And now the next slide explains now the best how now you instantiate that object out of our class. So like for instance, now in our main method. So I know most of you have been be able now to see the main method in any time you are writing your .NET code, but maybe .NET 8 and 9, you no longer need to see this, the class program, then the static void. You just need to go and write your code. So remember our cat. So we want now to instantiate a cat called cat Steven from our object from our class. So this cat Steven is an object that is being instantiated from our class, which we called the cat. So you can see our cat class here, it has capital C. So that's why we are calling now our class cat. Then we want to instantiate an object. So we are giving that an object a name, which is now cat01. Then we assign it what? The new keyword. So the new keyword, it will be able now to spawn a new object out of our class, which is now cat. And now use the new keyword, then cat function, like the cat function. So this is the default constructor. This is the function that is always invoked whenever you write a class. So this now you instantiate an object out of a class. So you just need to call the class cat, then give it a name, then assign it the new, then the constructor of that class. So we have now been able to construct that cat1 object. Now under our object, we can use now the dot operator to access the variables and the method inside our object, which is now cat1. So our cat1, the name we are assigning it to cat Steven, then the age 1. Then we are calling the function. Remember our function, we have a function here, which is right line, which is saying just the name of the cat and the name. So we are just calling that function. Then, so remember that the first object we have instantiated from our object So this is the first object we have instantiated from our object. Then the second one. So this is another cat we are instantiating. Remember, like class is just a blueprint, it's just sitting there. And whenever you want to respawn an object out of it, you just need to call that class and instantiate an object out of that. I guess by now you are able to understand what I mean. So you can now instantiate as many as possible objects out of a class. You can see now out of our cat class, we have been able to instantiate cat1 and we have assigned it cat a name Steven. Then we have instantiated another cat2 from our cat class and we have assigned it a name which is now Muley Cyrus and give it a name range of 12. So whenever now you instantiate an object, you use the dot operator to access the method and variables inside that object you have instantiated from your project. So with that, we can demonstrate this on on our VS Code and see whether it will work. So let me stop sharing and share my VS Code. So the same project we used, that's the same project. We'll be able to create a new class. So most of time when working with class, it's always advisable you have your class on a different files, then call them on the program.cs so that you can make your code clean and have some an organized way. So I'll have a new file here, which now we call it and maybe the class, what we want, like the class of cat. So we want now to have that class file here. So under our solution explorer, and you go under this namespace, the second one. So under this, you'll be able to see this icon here, which is now saying new file. If you click that new file, it will create a pop-up and you'll be able to select what you want to add in your program. So for instance, I want to add a cat class. So I want to select this class cat. So it gives a default name, which is class1, but I want to call it, so I'm creating a cat class. So I call it cat class and then click enter. So once I click enter, you'll be able now to see I have a new file here, which is now being grouped under this namespace called function demo. So whenever now I want to use this cat class in my program, I just need to import this namespace like this class using this namespace function demo. So under my program.cs, I just come here at the top and say using the namespace, which is now the function demo. So anytime now I write code at this cat class, we'll be able to access it in my program.cs file using the import this using the namespace function demo. And namespace, the keyword mostly used in C# to declare the scope that contain a set of related object, and you can use the namespace to organize your code element. Like now, if I want to have so many classes here, I can just decide to use the same function, the same namespace function demo, and now I can import that function demo namespace in my program.cs. So anytime now I have another class, like for instance, let me create a new class, maybe person, class person. Person. So I have created now the names, the class person. You can see now I'm using the same namespace. So any code I write here, and it will be able to, it will be accessible using now the namespace function demo. All right, so we are under cat. So under cat, I want now to define our class cat. Now the blueprint of our cat. As we said, like a cat, we have some variables and method. So you declare a class using the keyword class, then the function, the class name, which is now cat, using the capital, using the capital letter, then the name of that class you want. So let me define some variables here, the same way we saw on the PowerPoint. So I have some public. I use the access modifier public so that this variable name can be accessible everywhere in my code. So public, then string name. So I'm writing now my blueprint of my class cat. So string name, then age, which is now public string. Age is an integer, so let me use int age. Then I just want to have one function on this our class, so which is now void function that is returning nothing when I say void. So for method called meow, then parentheses, then curly braces. Under this, I want just console log the name of that cat and saying meow. So let me use the console class, then the function write line. Then under my function write line, just want to call the name of this cat, which is that. Then I want to concatenate it with just a string of 1 saying say meow, something like that. So with that, our blueprint of our class cat is done. And now I can instantiate an object out of this class. So let me go back now to my program.cs. And now I want to call, so let me comment this. Under here, so we have now imported our namespace. Now we can be able to access the, let me terminate our code here. So we can now be able to access this class and our program.cs using this namespace function demo. So under here, now we want to instantiate a object from our cat class. So the way we said, the first thing is to call the class. So our class was cat. So it's cat. Then the name of the object we want to instantiate. So for instance, it might be cat 0 number 1. Then we use assign, then we use the new keyword. So keyword, then the constructor of our class, which is now, it's always the same name, it always have the same name with the class name. So which is now cat function. Perhaps we will talk about the constructor later on. So with that now, we have been able now to create an object, cat1, from our class cat. And with this now, cat1, we can be able now to access members like the variables and functions inside our object. So we can see like we have 2 variables and 1 method. So under our cat1, and we use the dot operator, you'll be able to see like now we have the variable name, and you can be able to see we have function name, I mean the variable name. So I want to assign my cat a name. So which is cat.name. I want to assign it just a name, which is now Tom. Then terminate that. Then the same object, cat1, I want to give it age, which is cat1 dot age. Then it's an integer, so 1. Then we want to call now, we remember you have a function here, which is meow. So let me call that function there. So it's cat n dot our function, so which is meow. I think it's not accessible. Why? Because we have not indicated the access modifier. So by default, the function is private. So we need to make it public so that you can be able to access it anywhere in the code. So with that now, if you go back, use the cat1, then dot, you'll be able to see our function here, which is now meow. Then remember it's a function, you need to add those curly braces, then terminate. And with that, we have been able now to instantiate an object cat1. We have been able to assign it a name, Tom, and age, and we can now call the function that. And now, below here, we can now console our object there. So, which is now, we use the console class, then right line, then we call now our cat one, this one. So when we terminate that, then if we go back to our terminal, let me clear my terminal. So let me run my code again to see what we expect to see. So you can see now, so the first line, remember we have a console right here. Welcome to C#. I mean the function classes. This is what is being displayed. Then the next, we are displaying now our object, which is now Tom, our function, which is now Tom says meow. And where is being displayed is from our namespace function demo from our cat class, which is now this cat here, which is now we give it Tom. Then if you want to have now a new object, let me copy this, paste there, give it a different name, so cat2. Then we give it a name like so cat02 dot name. Let's give it Bob. Then cat2 age, which is maybe 2, and the function, we want to call that function of cat2 dot age. I mean the function meow. So the function has no parameters, so like that, terminate. So let me do display this 2 times here. So this will be cat2. Then so we'll be having now 2 objects being displayed. Cat1, which is Tom, and cat2, which is Bob. This is an integer, so you should not hand string like that. So let me display is here. So .NET run. So you can see now we have 2 cat. We have Tom and we have Bob. And that's how we work with classes and objects. So class, so objects are dependent. They depend on classes. So you almost of the time you need to instantiate an object out of class. Like for instance, the console we are using like this. So this is a class that is being defined by the C# library. Then under this class, we have the function, which is now right train. Now we are passing those parameters. So the same way, we are having our own blueprint class, which is cat. Then under our cat, we are instantiating two objects, which is now cat1 and cat2. And how do we do that? We just call the class, give it, once we instantiate an object, so object name, then we use the new keyword to instantiate an object out of our class, then we invoke a constructor out of our class that is now be able to instantiate that object, which is now cat1 or cat2. So that's the most basic how we work with classes and objects. Up to there, any question? So that you can be able now to wrap up, see maybe a more complex class and object. Any question after that? Are people lost or bado tunaelewana about the classes and objects? Silence means we are good to go. So let me have some a complex, a simple complex object. I mean class, and we instantiate some functions, an object out of that class. So let me check on my code. Yeah, so the next a complex class, I want to combine it with something we call inheritance. So inheritance, it's just a minute. Open this project. So I just want to open a simple documentation from learn.microsoft website, where it talks about a simple, brief introduction of what inheritance is. Then we wrap up with just a demo of this inheritance. So in this, you can be able now to see like a definition of inheritance. You can see like it's one of the fundamentals attributes in OOP programming, and it allows you to define child class that uses or inherit or maybe extend or modify the parent class. The class whose members are inherited is called the base class. Then the class that inherits the members is the base class. Is called the derived class. And in C# and .NET, we usually have, it only supports single inheritance, like a class can only inherit a single class. And however, that is transitive, which allows like you can define inheritance an hierarchy of set of type. In other words, like you can have a class D that inherit from class C, now which class C inherit from class B, now where class B inherit from a parent class called A. And a real quick example of inheritance is like I think of a class like employee, like a company. A company, like we have employees, but these employees, they have different categories. Like we have manager, we have HR, we have developers, we have ambassadors of that company. So all these are employees, but they have different roles in that employee. So we can have a parent class called employee. Then under that employee, we can inherit or extend that employee and have a class called manager. So because a manager, it's a specialization of an employee who is now is able to manage maybe number of teams and other things. So in this example here, so it's the same thing I did. So we have a program.cs, then we have a class employee, and we are using the namespace inheritance demo, which is now the same name with our project, which is inheritance demo. Then we are defining a base class, which is employee. I hope my screen is visible well. So we have a class employee, and this class has 3 variables, which is now the name, the employee ID, and the salary. So we are having the blueprint of our class called employee, so don't get confused. So our class has 3 variables and 1 function. This is now a constructor, so it's just a function that automatically being called whenever you an object of a class is being created. So, and as I said, the constructor has the same name as the class name. As you can see now, that's why you can see here we have the same employee name and the employee class. So we have these variables here, and our constructor is just assigning and giving some default values to our variables there. Then we have a function, which is now just displaying the information of that employee, which is now the employee, the name. So we are using the string interpolation, which is now we are using the $sign to dynamically call our variables here in our console.line function. So we have created an employee class. Under employee, we have so many categories, like we have managers. So under this manager, he has the same properties like an employee. So we don't need when you join the meeting, make sure you are muted. So we have now this class employee, and we want now to extend a class, which is now manager, who has the same features like an employee, like he has a name, he has an employee, he has a salary. So we don't need to define the same properties here in our class manager. Why? Because we can now extend or inherit these properties to our class manager using the full colon operator. So when you use now the full colon operator, then you give it the class where you want to derive or inherit properties from. So now our manager is inheriting everything, like everything from our class employee. So he is inheriting the properties like name, employee, and salary. Then is the same inheriting the function name, the function which is now displaying that. Then remember, this is a manager, so he has some more responsibility compared to a normal employee. That's why now you're adding like a variable name, like the numbers of team. Like manager can manage a team of like 15 teams. That's why now we cannot add this variable to our employee, because this employee is just a general employee of the company. But we are specializing that we are specializing that manager by inheriting everything from employee, because this manager is the same employee of this company, but has some extra responsibilities. Like he has the number of teams that he is managing. And now with that, we have been able now to earn the extra properties, like maybe the responsibilities that the manager is doing. And maybe now we want, just a minute. Yeah, so as I was saying, like we have now added a new responsibility to this manager, who is the employee, but have extra responsibility, which is now the number of teams. And now when we have our constructor of our class, remember each class has a constructor, and the constructor has the same name with the class name. So, and our constructor, we just need to pass the variables from our class inheritance. So with this, now variables can be accessed on our class manager. That's why you are passing there. Then we are using the same thing, the full colon. Then we use the base keyword to say like we are inheriting this constructor to our class manager, so that we can now be able to call our employee constructor, then add our own constructor so that we can be able to add this variable here, which is now the number of teams. And with that, now we can now have the same method from our first class, which is employee, but now we want to override that with now we can call the previous function, which is this, from our class employee, then add the new responsibility, which is the manager can manage like 15 teams. So with that, now we have two classes here, which is now employee. And our employee, we have a class manager, which is inheriting properties of employee. And now the manager has some more responsibility, which is the number of teams he is managing. Then we are just displaying that information in our, like we have only one function that is just displaying the information. So when now we go back to our program.cs, remember these are our entry points. So you need to make sure, like when you define your blueprint of your class, you need to call that classes in your program.cs, so that can be executed when they run this program. So using our namespace, which is inheritance, then we have a right line. We are just calling like we are running inheritance. Then same way, we are instantiating an object employee from our from a class, which is employee, and we are using the name, the new keyword, then calling our constructor and giving it the default value of our function. So these are one way of another way of assigning variables to your object. So the first one, remember, we used the dot operator, like we instantiated our project, our object, then using the dot operator, assigning one by one. But now we can use the constructor employee, this one. So employee, and now be able to assign it some the name, the employee ID, and the salary. So that's the first employee. So we have used the class employee, the base class, which now we have not been able to use the derived. So we have just instantiated an object out of this, excuse me. So we have instantiated an object out of employee. The same way we can instantiate object out of our class manager. So we have maybe manager one, so object manager one. So we are instantiating our class manager. We have an object called manager, then using the new keyword, then calling our the same constructor of our class manager, then give it the name. Remember the variables, the same values from our employee, because we are inheriting this. Then remember the manager has an extra responsibility, like the number of teams he is managing. So that's why you can see like we have an extra responsibility for that manager. And then we are now calling the function, which is now manager and display function, like the same we did the other one, like we want to display what is that. So let me run this program. And so .NET run. Perfect. So you can see these are just the topic of what we are running, the inheritance. Then the first object we instantiated, it was John Doe, which is now John Doe, who is an employee, has an ID of 123. Then the salary is 50,000. Then we went ahead, like this just a break line to differentiate the difference between the employee and the employee. So we have now the same employee, but it's a manager now, which is now the manager. So manager James Smith has the same properties from our employee, the name, the ID, the salary, but now has an extra responsibility, which is now he manages 5 teams. And with that, we saw it here. So that's where now we are overriding, like we are adding more function in our display info. Like we are calling this display info, not this. So this display info, we are specifying this display info from our base class. Then under that, below that function, we want to add another function that is displaying what this manager, how many teams like this manager is managing. And that's why you are seeing here, and our code, we have now manager. You can see now we have the employee Jane Smith, who is a manager, and he manages like 5 teams. And with that, I think I'm done. That's the most like basic way we can be able to explain the functions, names. I mean functions, classes, object, and maybe they use the inheritance functionality that is being used in C# to inherit some variables and properties of a base class to another class. Like now we have the employee class. We can have multiple classes, derived classes out of this. Like this is a manager. We can have a class developer. So who is like now is the end of IT, maybe the CTO, like something like that. The same we can have the HR, like HR is the same employee, but as a different responsibility, like has more responsibility, like he is the one managing the finance. Maybe he is the one recruits the employees of that company. So that's why you find that inheritance goes hand in hand when using .NET and C# ecosystem. So thank you. And now the floor is open to ask any question, clarification, and maybe a comment out of that. So if you have any question, you can raise your hand, use the chat, and I will be able to respond like in the next like 4-5 minutes before we end the meeting. Any question? Watu wamefruit ama ni nini? Ama ni concept imeingia vizuri? Which is which? People are quiet. Brian?
Yes, our attendees have some questions to ask if you need any clarification somewhere. And there was someone who had raised his hand up.
Yeah, I can
Just
remember
Daniel.
was
Sorry,
is
Munene.
it Daniel or Dennis? Dennis Munene.
Dennis Munene. Yeah.
Yeah. So as
Yes,
we
Bernard, your
wind
hand
up,
is up.
yeah.
Bernard is his hand is up.
Yeah, Bernard, go on.
Hello.
Yes.
Well, thanks for the presentation.
Yes.
I just wanted to seek some clarification, like the relationship between now the program.cs file and the other file you created for the classes. Like just perhaps you can repeat how are they related in terms of maybe importing other, like as you've done, like you've written the classes on the class file, and then you have the objects in the program.cs file. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bernard, for that question. And the relationship between the program.cs and other files, like we can write our classes inside our program.cs, but we'll have a long program.cs where now we have different classes there, like itakuwa imechanganyikana tu. But to make our code clean, what we want, like we create extra files, like the class we want, like the cat class, then the cat person, class person. Then we define our functions here, like we define the blueprint of our class. Then in our program.cs, you just need to call that class using the namespace like you define in your function in your class. Like for instance, this person class has name this namespace called function demo. So this name can be anything, like maybe can be anything like demo, but make sure now every class you want to group them together, like in the same this class, you need to use the same namespace, which is now demo, so that now if you want to access these classes on program.cs, you just use the using keyword from .NET library, then use the name of the namespace you specified on these classes. So you need to use maybe the same name, or you can have a class name which has maybe the cat class. Cat class, then under person, you can have a namespace called person class. So with these two namespace, now to access these two, you need now to use the same namespace using the namespace you defined here. You need to import it here, and you do that by using keyword like using, and under our cat class we have this namespace called cat class. So you need to import that there. The same thing with person. You have a namespace called person class. You need to import it in our program.cs. So the same thing using person class, and you are good to go. So that's the relationship between. So it's in simple terms, it's just to make your code clean. You don't want to make everything like to write everything on the program.cs. Right, Bernard?
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks. I've
Bernard.
understood. Yeah.
Thank you, Bernard. So another question, 1 minute or 2 minutes as we wind up. Okay, so I think there's no more question. We'll share the recording later for reference, and perhaps before I conclude, I have these. For me, I use .NET 8. That's why you are using you can download it on this link, which is aka.ms get-.NET 8. And 8 comes with some cool features like using now the top level statement where you don't need to define the main method or the program the class program where you call your other classes or functions. Then in the next 2 weeks, we shall be able to have a watch party for the release of .NET 9, and then we'll be able to explore .NET 9, see what capability is able to do, and everything that is included in that .NET 9 and the C# ecosystem as a whole. Thank you, Brian. Final word as we conclude.
Okay, thank you so much, Dennis. That was a very good presentation. You've explained everything like a beginner can be able to understand everything that you've been demoing from those PPTs, each one of them like showing some visual representation of how object-oriented really works. And for our attendees here, I see Dennis saying that, okay, can we do function overload in C#? Yes, that is very possible. For instance, there's something I was researching on, and then I think let me send you the same thing. Like for instance, you can have certain function, let's say display, like the one that I've sent in the chat. Display can be having some functionality like consoling out without a parameter. But if you want to still use the same method in C#, you see now you have to change the parameter that it takes. In this case, the second one takes an integer A, the third one maybe takes a string B. So you can use or overload a method, but now the parameters should always change. So that is very possible with C#. And C# is a very easy language, I think. By the look of things, this is one of the languages that you can always start with. Yeah, if there are no more questions, I've shared several links on the chat. So you can be able to access resources to different places. Like for instance, I've shared a link to the YouTube series. So it contains all the recordings that we have been having since the first session. The second one is a link to the certification that I told you earlier when we started. So it is important for you to do the certification because it gives you that credibility in your resume. Because if today I ask you like how many certifications have you done? So these are free certification for you. It's a partnership between FreeCodeCamp and Microsoft. So once you sign in, just create an account with FreeCodeCamp, you'll be able to access it. So the real learning happens on Microsoft Learn, but FreeCodeCamp will always track that you are actually learning this. It can take you 2 weeks to do the certification and then share with us once you complete it. As promised, anybody who completes the certifications gets LinkedIn Premium, so that you can get to also learn several things also on LinkedIn courses that are provided to you. Yeah, up to this point, I don't think there are any more questions. Coming next week, I think we shall be wrapping up most of this series. And most specifically, if there's some topics you want us to touch on, be sure to tell us on the WhatsApp group because we always depend on your feedback while creating these events. So next week, I will be wrapping up some of the things that haven't been mentioned, like how do you do polymorphism? Most of the things have been mentioned, so it can take some few minutes to just talk about polymorphism, abstraction, and encapsulation. Because since today we've talked about inheritance, then now we talk about how to handle exceptions with C#. Because as you write code, C# will always yell at you sometimes because probably you never got those exceptions while you are writing your program. So that will be next week's session. We'll try and keep it within time because I understand that at this point, most probably you wanted to also have your personal time. I will try and keep it 1 hour, 20 minutes at most, and shall have it at the session be a successful one. So .NET Conf is coming this coming month. It will happen from date 20, and Dennis Kaduri will be the first one hosting a watch party. So this is an information for all of us. Don't miss out on a watch party. Watch party is an event whereby we first get to see what are the new releases of .NET. Like for instance, we've been using now .NET 8 when writing these programs, and you could see how C# is evolving and the .NET ecosystem as a whole. So as .NET is evolving, it's good to know like what is coming in .NET 9, and we've run this series for quite some time, and you are now in a good place to write some C# code and do something with it. Yeah, as we proceed, we'll now get into developing the library, like now the ASP.NET. We'll create some few APIs, and you will be ready to write code with C#. Yeah, up to that point, if Dennis, you have anything to say?
Just to echo what you have said, I'll be the first one to host the .NET config watch party. It will be on date 16th. It will be on a Saturday, so 2 weeks from now. I'm prepping